Thank you very much, the organizers of the conference, that is the Australian Research Data Commons. Thank you for welcoming me to this vocabulary symposium. I am going to speak just in brief, or from a socio-economic point of view, the essence of indigenous data custodianship and governance, looking at frozen pathways and unknown civilizations, how indigenous data is significant. So we are defining, in our discussion, we are defining indigenous data, what it is. This is critical information that we have in any nation, in any given community, within even a family. You can trace it, this critical indigenous data. It is information that you get which is critical for the existence of that society. And it is the one on which processes are managed. It can be categorized into social, biological sciences, natural sciences, engineering sciences, depending on how development frontiers are changing within a community, and also depending on the level of development of that community. The indigenous data governance speaks of the way this data is managed and how all these other groups in the circles that I have indicated, social, biological, engineering, sciences, how are they contributing. So you have correspondingly those categories. And I think we in our country, in Zimbabwe and in Southern and Sub Saharan Africa, we are still in the process, I think, of coming up with this area of constructing this critical indigenous data, which is culturally founded, historically founded, regardless of the classes that I have indicated. The other issue that we may want to understand here is why custodianship or governance of data. It is very critical for identity of an individual community, for identity of a nation, of a country, and for defining the levels of scientific progress that a country is registering. That's the only level of a country. But again, to the extent a country or a community is part of the global community, it is also critical, that governance of data, indigenous data, it is also very critical for exchanging value with other communities across the world. In other words, it's critical for bridging the gaps that may be existing within the social, economic cycle, biological cycle. Now we have space technology and we have nuclear technologies also, and we have the challenges of climate change, as we all know, that need the sharing of this knowledge. So indigenous knowledge sometimes, if it is not well developed, it gets a kind of a compensatory, I think, dimension from the international dimension we are talking about, that it needs not only be national, but have an international dimension where common humanitarian issues will be discussed, and therefore the need for that indigenous knowledge to have also the international dimension. What are the major characteristics of this indigenous data? It should not be limited to the community or the nation itself, because it becomes very misleading in that case. You sort of divorce yourself from other processes from which humanity is already benefiting across the world. There are aspects of indigenous data, the characteristics that are quite critical for it to remain relevant to the community. The first being limitation. It must not be subject to limitation. In other words, limited to only a small group of people, or limited only to the nation. But it must be one that is if inward looking, but it must also have an outward orientation so that the community, the nation is part of the global community. The other issue that is very critical is there must be balance between what is closed and what is open data within a community or within a nation. For how long that data, which is specific to a community or a nation, for how long it will be closed? For when will it be open? Right. Under what circumstances? Right. All those dimensions, they are needed. But you also, like I said, want to identify yourself within a progressive world that is moving on. So the dimension to share is always very critical. What is the other issue that we have discussed in our paper, in our submission to the Australian Research Data Commons? One of the critical aspects or characteristics of indigenous knowledge, indigenous data, is it must not have the limitation aspect. It should be open-ended. But also very critical is to know which data and from which sector, from which area is to be shared, which is not to be shared. There must be time frame also on how long it should not be shared and how long can it be open and it be open now to the public. The other issue that is quite critical for indigenous data is its commercialization. We have seen nations actually during the time of COVID exchanging this data, these drugs that are made. It's part of the dialogue that is going on indigenous data. When that data is availed, the drugs themselves, the data when it is availed, we have a lot of advances also in other sciences that is going on climate change, space technology, nuclear technologies. It's all to do with indigenous data and the critical information that must be secured or kept through these governance mechanisms we are talking about. But however, in conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, allow me just to say, whatever the case, indigenous data should be meant in the final analysis, I think, for social progress, for the common human good. It must be data that is meant for peace, for change and transformation of communities, I think, to make this world worth living by all. Thank you very much. Merry Christmas and a prosperous 2024 Blessed New Year. Thank you.